There are sort of three elements of the mindset that I continually see. They're focused, confident, and motivated. And the focused bit means that they know what they're working on every session. So they're not just what I call going through the motions. Lots of athletes turn up, they do some training because the coach tells them that they've got to do some training today. But are they really focused on what they're doing? Do they have a sharp understanding about what today's session needs to give them? What they're working on today, the difference between the start of the session and the end of the session, and how that contributes to what they're trying to do this week and this month and this year, and how that maybe, if they're an Olympic athlete, falls into a 4-year Olympic cycle.
And welcome back to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, David Fung. And today I am here with the wonderful Simon Hartley out of the UK. Simon, welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So thanks for making this time. I know it's a little later in the afternoon right now on a Friday for you. So you're almost done your day?
The sun's setting, the beer's chilling in the fridge.
Okay. Yeah. I might grab a beer myself right now. Well, Simon, I always hand it over to my guests to make the first introduction of themselves. So talk a little bit about yourself and maybe also give some context about all the jerseys that are hanging in the background.
Yeah, sure. Well, my background is sports psychology, and it's something that I've now been doing for 30-ish years, just under 30 years. Whilst I say that I do sports psychology, my real passion and interest has always been to understand the very best in the world. How do they think? How do they make decisions? How do they overcome challenges and setbacks? How do they perceive risks? I want to get under the skin of world-class performance. And I sort of started with individual performers, but I'm also curious about teams and leaders and organizations. So over the last probably 20 or so years, I've been spending a lot of time in world-class environments, really unpicking what makes them great, trying to distill down what the principles are so that we can all adopt those and become great too.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just not warm up and just go right into that? What you've worked with some world-class teams. You work with the Fiji Rugby Sevens, a national team. You work with the Premier League football league. I don't know how you say this. The German league, Bundesliga, football league, Formula One, first class cricket, the NFL, you name it. So you work with some of the most elite teams in the world in sports. What stands out for you when you look at these teams?
There are some things that when I describe it, people think it must be something incredible. It must be something I've never thought of. It must be rocket science and brain surgery combined. And then I say to them, they do the simple things consistently better than everyone else. And they say, no, come on, tell me really what it is. No, they do the simple things better than everybody else consistently well. And they do that for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And when you think about how that actually shows up, so one of the first things I learned when I started working with individual athletes, elite athletes, is that the difference between their best day and their not so great day is pretty small.
Yes.
Statistically, it's between about 1% and 3% of their personal best, often.
Yeah, I've heard that in anecdotally when they're talking about, especially in the U.S. where you got college level sports, right? So people playing basketball and American football, and then they compare it to the professional leagues, and people have said like the biggest difference between that college level and the professional level is they make less mistakes at the professional level. If there's a 3-pointer they're shooting, they get that 3-pointer more times than not versus someone at the college level. So consistency sounds like it's important. But what are some of these little things that are consistent that stands out for you?
Well, if you think about how it shows up, it means that whatever's going on today, we can perform pretty close to our best. And in many elite sporting environments, athletes will travel They won't be sleeping in their own bed. They'll be sleeping in a hotel somewhere or athlete village, wherever it is. They won't be eating their own food. They probably picked up something on the plane. They've got a bit of a respiratory thing going on. So they're never going to be absolutely at their best. They might be in the middle of heavy training, carrying a bit of injury, whatever it is, but they will still post a near best performance. Now, for a lot of people, stuff happens in their life and their performance nosedives. So when you think about how it actually shows up, it means when we're talking about people being at their best consistently, it means that whatever's going on around them, they're resilient enough in their own mindset that they can post a good performance, but equally that they can do it day after day after day after day after day, which is also pretty rare when you think about it. Most people are good at either doing mediocre regularly, or they'll have a good day and a not so great day and a good day and a not so great day. But actually having consistent high performance day after day after day after day does differentiate the best in the world. And I saw a friend of mine's a Michelin star chef, and I was asking him about what it takes to create Michelin star food. And he said, it's not just the food, it's the service, it's everything around it, it's the whole experience. And he said, you have to produce really great quality, Michelin star quality every day. If you do it one day and then you're not great for the rest of the month, and then you do it again fleetingly, that's not going to get you a Michelin star.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is about delivering high performance consistently day after day after day.
So I guess how do you do that? Because that is, I find that's one of the toughest things to teach people. And I'm going to get very personal here. Just teaching my kids, what I'm trying to teach them at a young age is that, hey, I don't want to go to that sports practice. And from a young age, I go, why don't you want to go? I'm tired today. Okay, but we're still going to do it. And I explained to them, we're doing it because you got to be able to do it even when you don't feel like it, and when you don't feel like you're at your best. If you're sick, take your rest. But even when you're just feeling a bit off, it's okay. Just go do it again, and do it again. I don't think that's necessarily the best advice, Simon. So I'm curious, like, how do you gain some consistency and drive that high performance, like Michelin level stuff?
Yeah. Well, part of it is exactly what you said. You know, some days we don't feel like it, but we're going to put in a high quality session today. And the number of swimmers that I've worked with who talk about working 6 days a week, they get up ridiculous times in the morning. They go into the pool, they stare at a black line for hours, and they get out, they go and do some strength and conditioning. They might be going to school, coming back again. They might be going to the physio, whatever. They'll come back, they'll do another session in the evening. They'll do that 5-6 days a week, week in, week out for years. And you think, well, what keeps them going? One of the answers, and there are sort of three elements of the mindset that I continually see. They're focused, confident, and motivated. And the focused bit means that they know what they're working on every session. So they're not just what I call going through the motions. Lots of athletes turn up, they do some training because the coach tells them that they've got to do some training today, but are they really focused on what they're doing? Do they have a sharp understanding about what today's session needs to give them, what they're working on today, the difference between the start of the session and the end of the session, and how that contributes to what they're trying to do this week and this month and this year, and how that maybe, if they're an Olympic athlete, falls into a 4-year Olympic cycle. And that today's session is critical, and there's some stuff I really need to work on, I really need to get right because it's going to help contribute to my 4-year cycle. And there are an awful lot of athletes that don't have. Most people that I see in businesses don't have that understanding. They're turning up today because it's Tuesday and that's what you've got to do. And they've got a things to do list, so they'll work their way through the things to do list, but are they really focused on what they're doing, and particularly how they're trying to improve their performance from day to day to day to day? And it's one of those things that's incredibly rare. It's what differentiates world-class performers.
Yeah. So you mentioned focus, confidence, and motivation. Where do you see the other two factors coming in?
Well, confidence tends to come when we feel like we're good at what we do. And that happens when we're focused on the right things at the right time so that we perform well moment after moment after moment, and we can see our progress. And when that happens, it tends to fuel our confidence. And when that happens, we want to do some more of it, and that fuels our motivation. So these three, focus, confidence, and motivation, live together.
Yeah.
They're not independent, they're interdependent. One of the things that I think greases the wheels on all of this is curiosity.
Mm.
And whether you come across a Michelin star chef, an athlete, somebody who's great in another domain, they will often be driven by curiosity. They'll want to know how to improve, even if it's by a tiny fraction of a percent.
Yeah.
They'll want to know how they can get better. And that's one of those characteristics I continually see. And whilst I was talking about the athletes, the swimmers who stare at the black line on the bottom of the pool, they're always going to be interested in, how can I move through the water better? How can I improve my streamlining? How do I improve my start or my turn? Or how do I use my paddles, as they describe them, my hands and my forearms? How do I use them better to propel myself through the water? And it's that curiosity that keeps them really tuned into every session. It's the same with a Michelin star chef thinking, how do I create either more consistently great dishes or new flavor combinations or new experiences in the restaurant? How can I do that? How can I create an ever more memorable experience here?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I love watching on YouTube is eater.com and Munchies. Like they show a lot of chefs and what they do in terms of experimentation and just trying new things. There's another guy, Action Bronson. He's like a rapper slash chef, and you could see him going out and trying different foods and then experimenting with his friends who own a restaurant. And they're just trying things and experimenting. And what I find, for myself too, like the times when I've accelerated my learning and my progress is when I'm having fun, just trying new things. I don't care. I don't even care about the performance side. I wonder what this is all about. So, in my world, I was learning technology early in my career. I remember I was just so curious about breaking things and how to fix it.
Yeah.
Like that really sparked my interest, Simon. I wanted to break things just so I could fix it. Right now, software specifically, it was so fun. But that's how I accelerated my career because I was so curious. But I also, what you said about like the consistency. Some of the biggest accomplishments I found like looking back is when I was doing things I didn't want to do and I still did it, whether it's workouts or big presentations in front of a lot of people. You just do it despite how you're feeling, and those are the moments where you grow.
Yeah, and you start to develop some really critical characteristics in those moments. I'm a big believer that underneath our, what I call the mental game, the element of mindset that people normally think about, focus, confidence, motivation, etc. There's a layer, and it's that deeper layer, which is essentially combined of two things, or the combination of two things. It's character and identity. So character, that's our characteristics. Characteristics like tenacity, like patience, like consistency, like perseverance, those sort of characteristics. And the identity is what we believe about ourselves, the beliefs that we hold about ourselves. And in combination, those are really, really powerful drivers. But interestingly, both of them they're elements that we can develop. So I spent a long time, I spent a year really focused on developing consistency in myself because I knew I would start things, and if I didn't get any immediate traction on them, they'd sort of fizzle out and I'd lose a bit of interest.
Yeah.
And if the momentum went, then, it was probably dead and buried. So I spent a year, the year was 2018, deliberately building consistency in myself. I set myself a challenge, and characteristics are all developed through challenge. Particularly the choices we make when we hit challenges. That's what shapes our character. So consistency, my challenge was to run 1,000 miles in the year and do 1,000 press-ups a month, every month.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do either one of those in one go. You have to keep going at them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I had days when, now 2018, for those who follow the weather in our part of the world, we had a weather phenomena called the Beast from the East, which is essentially blizzards, minus 15
Oh
degrees.
boy.
It was Siberian and Eastern
I think I
European weather.
remember that. That is very odd for the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it happened in the March of the year that I'd set myself this challenge.
Okay.
So we were under meters of snow, and it was minus 15, and it was blizzard temperatures, or blizzard conditions, and minus whatever temperatures. And I had to go for a run because
Mm-hmm.
that was my challenge. I need to keep it going. I didn't run very far or very fast because I was knee deep in snow, but that's
You
what
showed
we
up.
did. And it's the choice you make in that moment that dictates whether you become a more consistent person or a less consistent person,
Mm-hmm.
whether you develop consistency as a characteristic or not. And when we understand that, tenacity is our ability to just keep going and not quit.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it gets tough, even when sometimes it's painful, we just keep going and we don't quit. So the moment when you hit what I call the quit point is your choice moment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep going? Do you find a way to keep going, or do you quit or back off?
Yeah.
In that moment, you decide whether you become a more tenacious person or a less tenacious person. And if we understand that there are characteristics that we probably need to build and cultivate and develop in ourselves, we can select a few and deliberately start to work on them so that we become the kind of person that we want to be and the kind of person that's going to become successful in our realm, in our life.
So I'm going to say something contrary to that for a second. And
Okay.
not that there's probably a lot of people here listening who are A-types, very driven individuals. And with driven individuals, I've talked to a lot of individuals like they were high performance athletes back when they were in university. And the thing that plagued them the most were injuries and getting sick. And 9 times out of 10, it was they pushed themselves too hard. They were really feeling off. They got sick, took them out for a week of training, etc. Right? What do you say to people who are so driven and so tenacious and so confident in themselves and so focused? What do you say to those folks when they actually might need to slow down?
Yeah, and this is where actually tenacity, I think, is a great characteristic. If you blend tenacity with desperation, it's not a good combination. If you blend it with stupidity, it's not a combination either. Lots of people do, because I can remember during that challenge, my 1,000-mile in the year challenge, I was running along one day and I could feel my calf tightening.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, should I just push through? Should I just man up, pull on the big pants, grit, employ a bit of grit and just get through this? And for a while, I had a bit of a tug of war going in my head. I had, this is stupid. You ought to just slow down and have a stretch and give it a rest. And I had the other bit going, no, push on, push on. Do you know, when I actually engaged what I call the quiet voice and quieten my mind, the wisdom, the quiet voice said, look, if you pull your calf, you're going to be off for 3 or 4 weeks. If you walk, treat it right now, you might be off for 3 or 4 days. Your goal is 1,000 miles in the year, not just to complete this run.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going to do? And I started to walk, and I put some ice on it when I got home, and within 3 or 4 days it was okay, and I was back running again.
Yeah.
So tenacity's a great characteristic to have, but we do need to know sometimes there's a price to pay. Are we willing to pay that price or not? Now, if you'd have said to me in that moment, whether you run or walk here dictates whether your kid's life is on the line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about the calf. I'm just running.
Yeah. Of course.
So to have it in our arsenal, tenacity in our arsenal, and to make sure that we can, when we need to, keep going. If we match that with understanding our wisdom, and we definitely know whether we're blending it with desperation or stupidity or whatever else it is. Because the athletes who keep going, sometimes when you look at their base motivation, what is it that they're motivated by? Sometimes it's fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
which is a powerful motivator, but not necessarily a healthy one.
Mm-hmm.
You can achieve a lot with it, but you might not be happy at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we really understand what's driving us and what the motivation is and why we're doing something, normally we can temper those sorts of characteristics and make sure we use them wisely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, when you say that, I realized when I was younger how it was tenacity and stupidity, truly.
Yeah.
And what I understand now, and now that I'm older, is that I think it is about what the driver was behind whatever, like when I set my mind to something, it used to just be like at all costs, like I got to achieve this. But that is a problem when you treat everything as urgent. Everything is desperation in some ways.
Mm.
Like if I don't this one task today, if I don't do it, the world's over. It means I'm weak. It means I'm a failure. It means I'm on the path to something bad. And that, yeah, and that's I've learned from that, by the way, after many injuries,
Yeah.
many injuries and problems. Yeah. So
yeah. And this is where identity comes in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So again, why are we doing this thing? I ask stupid questions, a lot of stupid questions. I ask stupid questions to athletes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can remember having a conversation with a swimmer one day who we understood that he wanted to win gold medals, all that sort of stuff. But I said to him, why? Why do you do this? Why do you wake up at stupid o'clock in the morning? Every morning you come into the pool, you go up and down and up and down and up and down. And then you get out and you go strength and conditioning and come into the physio room, come and see me, back in the pool, up and down.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you stink of chlorine. Your hair's a mess. What's it all about? And you're not going to drown, by the way. You can swim. So it's not a safety thing, is it? What's it all about? And he said, it's to win a gold medal. I said, fantastic. I'm going to pop down to the trophy shop and buy you a gold medal. There you go, done. And he said, no, that's not what it's all about. And then he said, it's to be the best. No, it isn't. It's not. No, it's not about being the best. Mm-hmm. He said, it's probably more about being my best. Because he said, ultimately, if I swim as fast as I possibly can and somebody else swims quicker than me, they're going to win the race. Mm-hmm. If I swim as fast as I can and nobody else swims quicker than me, I'll win the race. That's it. Mm-hmm. And then he figured out this was really about making sure when he finished his career, he could look back and say, no regrets. I gave it everything. I can be really happy with my career. My aim really is to lay down my potential, to explore my potential, to see what I'm capable of. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And I happen to be doing it through swimming. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, I kept touch with that athlete, finished his competitive career in 2008. We're still very good friends now. And I've seen him apply exactly that same philosophy outside of swimming. He's just continued the same journey, just not in the pool anymore. He's done it building a business. He's done it mentoring. He's done it. He's a keynote speaker. He's got a learn to swim business. The other really interesting thing, and this is where I think when I look at the value of sports psychology, yes, it helps athletes win medals, but the bigger value is that it helps develop people. Mm-hmm. And he will say that he's very proud of all of the medals and the records and everything else, but he's more proud of who he became as part of the process. And when we really think about, so big deal, you picked up the trophy, somebody else didn't. Well done. But what have you won really? What's the win here? Mm-hmm. We've got to understand why we do it, what the win really is. So we're going to give blood, sweat and tears to this thing? Great. Why? Mm-hmm. You pick up the trophy, they pick up the trophy. What's the difference? It's just a metal cup.
Yeah. Yeah. The concept of identity, that's deep there, right?
Oh,
where you attach something you achieve in the real world physically to a belief that you have about yourself. That's, I guess, how have you worked with athletes through some of that? Like, you know, I'm at a loss for words there, right? Because I realize, and I keep going back to the personal side, right? Like how much you can attach your identity to what you do in business, what you do in life, at home, how you achieve things. But you gave a good example there, how you work with this individual. But just teams in general.
Mm.
How do you work a team through their identity? Because we're talking about individuals. Let's talk about teams for a second. How do you get their help them uncover what their identity is and what they're trying to achieve?
Well, so purpose and identity are different,
Mm-hmm.
but one can feed the other. So I will ask a team, why do you do what you do? Why is it important?
Mm-hmm.
And in a business, if they say, well, it's to make money, so to what end? And why are we trying to make huge amounts of money rather than just enough to pay everybody and make sure we've all got a decent living and go home? Bizarrely, people are often disconnected to the true purpose of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember asking a construction company one day, why do you do what you do? And they build railways in the UK and railway bridges and platforms at stations and all those sorts of things. And I said, why do you do what you do? And they said, something about shareholder returns or share price, share value. And I said, no, why do you build railways and bridges? And they're like, what do you mean, so that they don't fall down? Yeah. So that people can go up and down the rail network safely. Yeah, that. Oh, yeah, that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd become completely disconnected with the actual purpose of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people do. So then they think, well, how do I know whether I'm successful or not? Well, the only thing I've got to go on is whether we hit the target, whether we made more money than last year, how much bonus I get. And you're like, really? We're going to build our whole understanding of personal success, value to the world. We're going to build it on that. That's as crazy as an athlete building their whole identity on whether they win or lose a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, they do. Athletes often build their identity around that. But when you think about it, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I going back into sport and showing you an example, I took two athletes, and one was a javelin thrower, one was a swimmer. They were both struggling with this. So I said to the swimmer, I said, you see that javelin thrower there? If they throw the javelin slightly less distance into the field, do they become a worse person? And he went, no, that's ridiculous. Right, javelin thrower, you see that swimmer there? If he swims up and down the pool slightly slower today than he did yesterday, is he a worse person? No, that's ridiculous. All right, now apply that onto yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the moment, you're caught into thinking that your whole value, your identity, everything is linked to how far that javelin goes into the field or how quickly you swim up and down a pool, which, let's be honest, is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I work with a lot of high achievers, if you want to call that. It's actually a privilege, Simon, to work with such high achievers and individuals who are very accomplished in their lives. But one of the things I've noticed is that it's exactly that. Some individuals are working themselves into the ground, and I do, I do performance coaching too, not psychology like you do, right? But just uncovering like what's driving you. And this one individual said, I just can't see things fail. And you realize how they attach themselves to any failure around. And if they had an opportunity to not let it fail, they see that as a failure if they let it fail, and they want to swoop in to fix the problem. And that is very tough to coach. I don't even know how to coach it out of a person. There's no such thing, but there's some wiring there from years and years of, how they grew up and the beliefs that they've built. I guess in your world, like what sort of similarities have you seen in the business world or sports world to that type of mentality? You talked about two examples there, right? But I'd love to hear some stories around that.
Well, I think most people are caught in I think it probably a societal way of thinking. I think society probably drums this into us from being tiny.
Mm-hmm.
That the way you understand your success is through achievement, through attainment, through results, through whatever it is, and it starts in school.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know if you're a success? You get better grades in school, or you get to play for the sports team, or you get to be the star in the school show, or whatever the school performance.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you understand your success. And I remember back to watching my two daughters when they were young. So they were both girls. They did the standard ballet classes and whatever
Mm-hmm.
that most do when they're about 3 years old. And I watched them doing gymnastics and ballet and all those sorts of things. And they would go into a competition. Now, the reason they started was because they just loved moving. You know, they wanted to be upside down. They wanted to roll around on the floor. They wanted to do a handstand because you're upside down. You see the world completely differently. They wanted to do a cartwheel because you could spin over. And they just loved all of that. And then, at probably about the age of 4, the club said, "Oh, we've got a competition. And
Mm-hmm.
we're going to grade you. We're going to judge you all. And there'll be ribbons and prizes and medals and this, that, and the other."
The game
And
changed right there.
all of a sudden, the dynamic changes right there. And
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed, and one thing I was really conscious of as a parent, if they came out and said, "Daddy, Daddy, I won a ribbon or I got a medal or whatever," if my response is to go, "Yay, brilliant," they're going to start automatically thinking, "I make Daddy happy if I win one of these things." If they didn't get one and I went, "Oh, well, no problem, never mind, it's okay," then they're also going to say, "I make Daddy sad when I don't get one."
Mm.
So I was really conscious that I don't want to give them any of that.
Yeah.
I want them to know that win, lose, or draw today, gold, silver, bronze, blue, yellow, green, whatever, um, I'm just as proud of you. And this is one thing that I learned growing up and becoming, from being at school and being a teenager to becoming an adult and growing through my adult years. I always felt like my parents were proud of me for what I did. Better grades at school, more proud. If I missed out, not quite as
Mm.
proud. Even coming into adult life, when I published my first book, "Oh, we're really proud of you for publishing a book." It's like, I'm no different now the day after I published it than I was the day before.
Yeah.
I'm not a better person now because the book's in print than I was yesterday when it was still a draft. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. I also remember a conversation with a mentor of mine when I first started working in professional sport. He said, "The better you are in this business, the more you get paid, and I get paid loads." And I was an impressionable 20-odd-year-old at the time, and I thought, "Oh, right, okay. In that case, I need to be really good, and I need to get paid loads, and then I can be
Yeah.
proud of how good I am as a practitioner." About 3 or 4 years later, I was getting paid less than I was then, and I was driving along thinking, "But I'm better now as a practitioner, and I'm getting paid less. So it doesn't work, does it?"
Mm-hmm.
And as I was driving, I remember saying to myself, "I am not the money in my wallet. I'm not the size of my house or the size of my car, or I'm not the make of watch. That's not me, and it doesn't reflect me, and it doesn't reflect how good I am at what I do professionally. And it certainly doesn't reflect who I am as a person and whether I'm a good human being or not." So I changed my definition of success from attainment, achievement, and results and all that sort of stuff
Mm.
to being proud of who I am, not what I do or what I get or what I achieve or attain or have.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a reflection of my success as a
Mm.
person. So I will tell my daughters, "I'm proud of you for who you are, not the results you get in your exams."
Yeah.
For me, that's where I find sanity. That's what I would say to athletes. You are not your result. If you decide to be defined or choose to be defined by your result, that's up to you. I will
Mm-hmm.
say to executives, you are not the results of the business. You are not your bonus check. You are not any of those things. Um, let's understand that your success as a human being is defined by who you are. It's more about how you get to the result than it is about getting there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you peel back to that layer and reflect on that, lots of people will look at themselves and say, actually, I'm not really that happy with who I am. That's fine. We can work on it. You can build your characteristics. You can decide, I want to be more patient. I want to be more tolerant. I want to be more generous. Great. Let's do it. Let's build that. They're all characteristics that I've been working on for a few years. Let's take a couple. Let's give them some real focus. Let's work out a plan and a set of challenges that we can work ourselves through. Let's build those characteristics. And then when we look back on ourselves, and this is where identity and character are linked in, we can look at ourselves and say, I am a more generous person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm becoming a kinder person. I'm becoming a more tolerant person. And then we might become proud of who we are.
That's wonderful, Simon. Thank you for sharing that. This leads me to a question I ask every guest. So knowing what you know now, then, if you had to go back to an earlier version of Simon and ask him a question and give him one piece of advice, what would those two things be?
The advice one's quite simple in my view, and it's one that I reflected on many, many years ago. The single greatest piece of advice I would give myself is take your own advice.
Absolutely.
Because I think if we all took our own advice, we'd all be brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the question I'd ask myself back then, who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? What kind of person do you want to be? Okay, great. Start working on becoming that person.
Wonderful.
And that's one that I realized relatively late in life that, in hindsight, if I look back on myself as a teenager, I wasn't particularly nice. And that's why I probably craved results, validation from other people, external sources of pride when I was that old, because I wasn't a very nice person back then. Now, do I need other people's validation? Not really. If they like me, great, they like me. If they don't, no problem. They don't have to. That's okay. I like me now, so I can be happy with that. And do I need the results to show me I'm good enough? No, I think I feel good enough. Am I a good husband, a good dad, a good brother, good son? You're not perfect, no, but I'm happy with that. So if I earn more this year than I did last year, or I earned more last year than I have this year, if I go from having a big car to a small car, or a big house to a little house, or it doesn't dictate whether I'm any more successful or not, or happy with me. So yeah, that's probably what I would ask myself.
Yeah.
My teenage self or younger self.
Yeah. It's being comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah,
It seems like it does come with time and age, right? But when you're comfortable in your own skin, that validation, I have to admit that still comes in, areas of, our lives, right? Where we're trying to validate something about ourselves, but hopefully less and less as we get older, right?
Yeah, and I think as a top up, no problem. If we're utterly reliant on it, we hand over the remote control to others.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're not in control of
You're not in
how we
control.
feel
You're
about
always
ourselves.
worried about what other people are thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So Simon, one more question to you. What's one question I haven't asked you yet?
There's a lot of questions you haven't asked me yet.
Yeah.
What's
one question I asked you? What's one question I haven't asked, but I should have?
Now you'll have to get the edit suite out here for me to have a good old think. What's the one question that you haven't asked me that you should have asked me? Okay, what's the single greatest driver of happiness?
What is the single greatest driver of happiness?
I think being happy with ourselves. I think if you look at the research, a lot of research will say that it's based on really good, healthy, strong relationships. I completely agree. The number one relationship, I would say, is the relationship with ourselves. And we have to get that one right first.
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about, being comfortable and happy and content in your own skin.
Yeah. Fix yourself before you start fixing others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, Simon, it's been 40 minutes, sir. I appreciate you.
Has it? Blimey,
Yeah,
it's flown by.
I know it's flown by. I sincerely want to go longer. Um, Look, I want to book you back in the near future if that's okay, because I feel like we've only touched the tip of the iceberg on some of these topics. I find what you do absolutely fascinating. Um, I've been I've been a student of like what makes people tick. Obviously, I'm still learning a lot of that stuff, but I am very interested in what makes people tick and how we get institute change in individuals to to have them go from point A to point B. So I'd love to have you back in the near future if you're willing.
Yeah, it'd be a
Um,
pleasure.
yeah, yeah. Well, look, I'm going to stop the recording now, and everyone listening, thank you very much for taking the time today.